Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Graham Trusler, who's the CEO and founder of Digby Wells Environmental, who provide environmental, social and sustainability solutions for the resource, infrastructure, energy and agriculture sectors. Their services range from exploration to extraction to rehabilitation and closure, as they have knowledge to support you and the mining industry through every milestone of a project life cycle. Graham has 30 years of experience within the mining industry in metallurgical production, research and environmental issues. And he's going to talk to us about the environmental practices in our industry and what mining companies can do to improve standards across the globe. Graham, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Very nice to be part of this podcast and doing very well. Thank you.
No worries, and I appreciate your time also. So, first of all, wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your career, and I suppose also how you ended up specialising more in the environmental field.
I didn't have any family history in the mining industry, but I happened to get a bursary through a big company called Rand Mines at that time. And they paid for my studies. So it was very useful and very nice as a youngster to have a company pay for you. I studied chemical engineering and then did a little bit of postgrad work in water treatment. At the time in South Africa, particularly, there was a big problem with salinization of water and too many sulfates in water. So we developed a barium process to remove that. And then when I got into the mining industry, I started off in production and got into a very good training program. So I did a bit of extraction of platinum in a refinery, coal, gold, vanadium, and it exposed me to a good range of minerals and a lot of different ways of extracting it and processing it. But I soon realized, production wasn't really what I wanted to do. And then ended up in the environmental team of this company, Rand Mines, and particularly looking after the group's water issues. And there I really enjoyed it, and I've kind of been there for the last 30 odd years or more in the environmental side of it.
So obviously you're the founder and CEO of Digby Wells Environmental. Just wonder if you can just tell us tell us a little bit about the company and a snapshot of the company and what you actually do.
Thank you very much, Rob. Me and three other guys were the environmental department of Rand Mines, and it fell on harder times and kind of got rid of its gold division, which became Rand Gold Resources, and then now the management team at Barrick. The coal division where we were working at the time was sold into what has become BHP Billiton. And we were offered jobs back on the mines, but didn't really want to take that, seeing we'd enjoyed the head office kind of living and the consulting in a technical field. So in 1994, we actually got retrenched out of the big mining company. Got 3 months' salary, so that enabled us to pay the bills for a little while we started anew in South Africa in January 95, and that was a time of great political change as well. A new government was in power, democracy. So it was very lucky for us is that environmental issues have been growing since then. The continent of Africa has grown. The end of the Cold War enabled many big Western companies to invest back into Africa. So it was a great time of adventure and a new growing field. Stressful starting a new business, but now in January coming up. It's going to be 30 years that we've been in business, and it's been a very fulfilling time. And we worked on many, many places and commodities and for many companies. So it's been great fun.
And what kind of services do you provide into the mining industry?
So our bread and butter used to be environmental impact assessments, or environmental and social impact assessments as they are now. But then we do closure cost assessments, closure plans for mines. And over the last number of years, some of our biggest products have been on the social side, on people side. So we do resettlement action plans, consultation for the oil and gas industry as well as mining. With people is obviously a very dynamic and interesting part to the business. And most developing countries, this is the biggest issue you've got to deal with, is your neighbors and how do you treat them properly. So it's been very nice to integrate that with all the technical environmental work we do, and to make sure it's good for the people surrounding the mines.
For the mining operations that you're involved with, to what standards do mining companies need to comply with? And I suppose, what are those reasons?
Very interesting one, because people say, well, if you're working in Burkina Faso or Mali or Cote d'Ivoire, what standards apply? Is it Western standards, French standards, the in-country standards? And like anything, there's always the golden rule. He with the gold makes the rules. So the funders, whether they're from a banking community, they normally go with International Finance Corporation or IFC rules and guidelines. If they signed up to the Equator Principles, they've got another few to go with. So even though we work in developing countries mostly, the rules and regulations are right up there. Often not very well policed, but we do need to do things to the best international standards. It's not just because you're in a rural and remote area that you can just do what you like.
And I suppose, moving on from that, do the best do the best international standards apply in those developing countries?
Yes, so most of these standards say, they've got a set of guideline standards, but you also need to comply with the in-country regulations and laws. So whichever is the most stringent applies in these operations.
And with, obviously, what are the big environmental items or issues mining companies need to get right in order to be successful, and I suppose meet all the criteria via the different legislations in obviously the different countries and jurisdictions around the world?
This is quite variable, because you have to take your partners with you, which is the community in which you have this operation. So the people around you need to see the benefits of what you're doing. They need to be employed or get their roads and water systems upgraded. They need to see the benefits of what you're doing. And then you won't have blockades of the roads as you do see in a lot of jurisdictions. You also need to take the government with you and the agencies with you, so that they support you and they see you as a partner in development in the areas. And then, maybe I've got a penchant, because I come from the water side, is that you need to plan your operation from the start to the finish, so that the long-term liability. We've seen far too many operations just promise perpetual water treatment, and it's easy to say to get your permitting right, but forever some of these operations have acid mine drainage issues, that they need liming or other treatment to be able to dispose of the water, or have arsenic that they need to treat to. In perpetuity is a very long time. So to reduce those costs, design the mine so that it can be closed sustainably. And in perpetuity, anything to us is not sustainable.
What can a country's government and local people expect from a mining operation in their area? And obviously, I suppose there's a lot of exploration sites out there looking to make that next discovery. And I suppose in the early stages, the local communities are not actually going to see the benefit until, I suppose, it's in operation. So, yeah. So, what do you? I suppose, how do you assist in sending that message across to local people surrounding a mine operation?
I think the key that we try to get across is that they need to be partners in the operation. You know, they can expect whatever job opportunities there are, even from a exploration phase, that be given to local people preferentially. And we encourage the guys to do a good baseline assessment so you get a size of the different villages there and can spread the jobs proportionally between them. But you set that the standards early on in your exploration phase. So if you're digging trenches and there are animals falling onto it or kids getting injured, then it's going to be a problem forever. But often you need to temper the expectations that everybody's going to get a job, because not everybody does. But what we've done quite successfully is to take, say, traditional leaders from one area to another, let them see what the impacts of mining are, seeing how wonderful it can be if money is spent locally, roads are upgraded, schools get upgraded. But in order to do that, you've actually got to have the operation. So it doesn't help, stopping it before it starts, but to be a partner throughout the life of the operation. And just having the economic activity in a rural or remote areas, huge financial benefits for the government. So just the fact that the mining companies are paying salaries and paying taxes and buying diesel and using the roads and, using hotels is a huge benefit. And, we've seen approximately 50% of all the revenue going to a mining operation ends up in the host country's coffers in some form or other, on VAT, withholding taxes, royalties, etc. So just having that economic activity is a very big and good thing. But you obviously don't want to have conflict there. You don't want to have traditional people that are kicked off their land and don't benefit. You don't want to cause a safety incident like we've seen with tailings dams. Then it really is not being a good neighbor. So people should be able to expect that the operation will be safe and that it will be able to deliver a great deal of revenue and wealth for the people around you.
Some of the big environmental items on the agenda for most of the mining companies now?
I think a lot of them are under pressure from their shareholders and bankers to report more on environmental issues. So the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, is requiring a lot of sustainability reporting. Sustainability reporting for these mining companies. Climate change is now a big issue, which they've never had to deal with before. Greenhouse gas emission calculations used to be quite a thing which is scoffed at. Now people have to do it and they have to report on their carbon footprinting. People have to deal with climate change, which is real. People are seeing more rainfall events. They're seeing more intense rainfall. So they have to redesign their tailings facilities and even having to go to closed facilities because the rainfall patterns may have changed. So you have to redo what you thought was closed and dead and buried.
Obviously, with a lot of talk around, obviously, electrification, the green economy, and the need for, obviously, critical minerals, what changes do you see in terms of electrification and critical minerals?
So for us, it's been very interesting this whole electrification drive has led to the greater demand for copper, and we are seeing that in all of our work. There's a lot of interest in copper, and there's a lot of money being put into that. And that provides a great opportunity for Zambia, Southern Congo, and possibly Botswana, South Africa, Namibia, to provide a lot of that copper. South America has been a stable provider for a long time, but it's a good opportunity for the southern part of Africa to grow. And some of our clients have had to try out hydrogen vehicles. Some of them are installing electric light vehicles. We haven't seen the heavy electric trucks in there yet. But it is an interesting thought process that guys have got to go through on how you set up charging stations. How do you operate in very cold weather, when it's below freezing, and a lot of these batteries' lives go down. So what is pleasing to see people trying to electrify their own fleet slowly. There's also been a lot of work being done on critical minerals mines, and the definition of critical minerals does change, depends on who you ask. But what we've seen, it's very difficult for our clients there to get funding. It's either going to end up from Chinese sources or very difficult to raise elsewhere. So I think the Western world has got to do a lot of catching up with actually making its money, putting its money where its mouth is. It knows it needs critical minerals for batteries, for all this energy transmission, the high-tech industry. But frankly, we haven't seen the money going into the mines and the processing facilities to be able to supply these critical minerals yet. So we hope that talk and planning on that score leads to actual, developments on the ground and processing facilities.
You touched on obviously climate change. How does climate change affect mining operations now? And I know you mentioned a few issues. And how do you assist those companies with those issues that will affect because of the climate change?
So there's a number of agencies around the world which spend quite a bit of time predicting how climate is going to change in different regions of the world. So we get stuck in, and depending on where your operations are, Central America, Caribbean, East Africa, Central Africa, there's going to be changes to rainfall patterns and intensities. There may be periods of longer drought. There may be greater heat stress on some of your employees. Some water supplies might dry up. Some may be too much. So we help our clients in adapting for where they are, because not all climate change effects are going to be the same wherever. So it depends on where you are, and we do climate resilience studies and help them manage the risks as well as potentially the opportunities which may arise from climate change.
Have the GISTM standards changed the way the companies are dealing with their wastes? And do you think they are more responsible?
GISTM has led to a fundamental change in the way tailings facilities are being dealt with. And a number of our clients are having to put up extra buttressing, change the way they construct tailings dams now, instead of upstream, changing to a downstream construction. The use of penstocks, for instance, is not encouraged, so it leads to a different way of managing your water off a tailings dam. And you have to engage with your community around there. And this makes a lot of mining executives very nervous, because they've got to show a spill zone, or if there's a breach, where this breach would go from a tailings dam. And then you need to engage with the community below you on where this could go. And sometimes it's a very scary picture, a very big flooded area, and you don't want to go to the public and show them this, but you do need to, and you've got to have those discussions on risk. Might happen, but it probably won't happen, and talk about probabilities, 1 in 500 year, trying to translate that to the community which is below a tailings dam. But what is positive is that these conversations are happening. And from what we've seen, the responsible operators are making their tailings facilities a lot safer than they were in the past, and taking a lot seriously, which is a very positive impact.
In the work that you do, what do you see the biggest challenges our industry is facing moving forward?
Sorry, could you just repeat that, Rob?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, in the work that you do, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing our industry moving forward?
I think it's a legitimacy challenge in a lot of the first world countries where the money is going to come from. Pension funds, investment funds, that mining is a good investment, and that it does change lives positively and is not a dangerous thing where people get, disease or get nailed by tailings dams. So I think our biggest challenge as an industry is to make it a positive message, and to deal honestly with the mess which has been created in some areas, to actually clean up, or bad tailings spills, etc. But to do it in a responsible way so that people can see that there's a legitimate case to be made for investing in mining companies.
And lastly, what's the outlook for Digby Wells Environmental over the sort of next 6 to 12 months?
It's been very positive over the last while, and fortunately, in our space, the needs for our services are continuing to grow. So we are expanding. We've got 5 or 6 offices in Africa, and that'll be, we hope to have another 2 operating at least in the next few years, and to have a bit more permanent presence in North America and Central and South America. There's a lot of skills there that can be transferred. And we also want to get closer to a lot of our clients coming from Australia. So we are busy establishing a presence in Perth as well, to speak to where a lot of the funders come from and the people working in developed countries, particularly Africa, and the money and the skills coming out of Perth. So we want to just be a little bit closer to the Australians as well.
Yeah. Graham, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story, telling us about Digby Wells Environmental, and obviously wish you well for the remainder of the year going into 2025. If our audience wants to follow your story, they might have inquiries or may need some help in obviously some of the services that you do provide. How can our audience follow the company, and how do they? And are you across any social media like YouTube, LinkedIn, etc.? And how can they get in contact with you?
Website is digbywells.com, and LinkedIn is probably our most active social media site. So please look us up there, join as a follower, and send us messages. We'd love to engage with you, speak to you about issues, and help solve problems together and talk about opportunities.
Yeah. Graham, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for your time and sharing your story. I'm sure our audience will find this valuable, and I hope they share this episode among people within their industry, colleagues within other companies, and obviously share it to people outside of our mining industry also, because we do need to spread the word. And I suppose the services that you provide are showing and I suppose can improve the branding of mining, that you're taking care of obviously the environment, you're taking care of the communities, and you're demonstrating that by working obviously with your clients. So I hope our audience can share this episode far and wide.
Thank you very much, Rob. It's been very interesting to see how many kids we've had applying for environmental jobs whose parents have been mining engineers. So they've seen their fathers dig holes in the ground, and now we help to fill them up again.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Good to hear. Well, thank you again, and hopefully we can catch up sometime next year and record another episode.
Great. Thanks very much, Rob.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Please share this episode far and wide, as I've mentioned, and not just people within our mining industry, but people outside of our mining industry. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.